Morning all. Before get started, just wanted to give you a heads up that I've been challenged this morning to sneak a word into the sermon somewhere. So pay close attention and see if you can spot the word. It might be a bit out of place, but I'll try and sneak it in as deftly as I can. So see how you go. Earlier this year, I was in Adelaide. Had a weekend away in Adelaide with some friends. I hesitate to call it a boys' weekend for the connotations that has, but it was a bit like that. And we were in Adelaide for that round in the footy where all the teams play in the same place on the one weekend. It was a great weekend. The funny thing about being there is that because the entire football league is in the one place, you see lots of people that you recognise, lots of faces that you've seen before on TV or seen in the process of following the league. You'll see them, and you see them in real life because everyone is there on that weekend. Things like we saw at times a few coaches randomly sort of walking past with their army of staff members from the club, or journalists, TV personalities that were on the telecast, on the broadcast. We would see them around. And there's this sort of funny moment, and I wonder if you've had this sort of moment before, where they walk past or you see them and you sort of go, I feel like I know you. I feel like I've seen you before. I feel like I know you. We'd watch them play footy or watch them on the broadcast or anything like that, and you sort of go, I feel like I know you. But then, of course, they're standing right there in real life, and you go, oh, gee, that's so-and-so. And reality hits that, of course, you might know them, but they have no idea who you are. You don't know them. You know them at all. You know them. They don't know you at all. It's completely one-directional. It's like this sort of asymmetrical relationship going on. And I sort of wonder if that's what Zacchaeus was expecting when he heard that Jesus was passing through Jericho. He wanted to see Jesus. He must have heard about Jesus. He must have known his reputation. But why would Jesus know him? He's just another face in the crowd. Maybe he might catch a glimpse of Jesus, see what the fuss was about, and that would be that. One directional. He sees Jesus, Jesus walks past. But that's not the story that we get from Zacchaeus. Luke tells us that Zacchaeus was a tax collector. Not only a tax collector, he was a chief tax collector. So he wasn't just corrupt, but he was the head of the corruption. He was the one organising it in that area. He was working with Rome to collect taxes, and then he was hiring other tax collectors to squeeze even more money out of his community. The money he made came straight from exploiting his own people, and everyone would have hated him for it. But verse 3 tells us nonetheless that he wanted to see Jesus. He wanted to see who Jesus was. And what is he willing to do? Well, we hear that he's short, he couldn't see over the crowd. And so we hear that he runs ahead and he climbs a sycamore tree. Zacchaeus, the tax collector, is running ahead and he's climbing a sycamore tree. It's a little bit like we heard last week. Daniel spoke to us about the vital role of children. And here in Luke 19, we sort of almost get the first look at what childlike faith might look like. Here's a man in robes running undignified and climbing a tree. It's the quintessential childlike activity, climbing a tree. His desire to see Jesus was strong enough to overcome the pride that he would have had in that moment. He didn't care what people thought of him. And this tells us a little bit about what it looks like to really seek Jesus. It's not something that we put half our hearts into or that we approach casually. It's something that does make us look a little bit silly. Something that does make us do things that don't fit our image or our status. Zacchaeus ran and he climbed the tree because even then he knew that seeing Jesus mattered more than keeping up appearances. But that's a bit of a question that verse 3 raises. Zacchaeus wanted to see Jesus. Would he actually be able to reach him? He's run ahead, he's climbed a tree, he's got a better view, but even from up in the tree, Zacchaeus is still separated from Jesus. He's still at a distance. He's done all the seeking he can, but he's ultimately still in a position separated from Jesus. It raises questions over the ways that we seek. Are they enough? Is wanting to see Jesus enough to reach him? Well, there's a few limitations that Zacchaeus faced. The first one is perhaps the most obvious one, and it's the one that gets focused on the most, especially with kids, because it's completely relevant. He was short. He had a physical limitation. There was something outside of his control, something he had no choice over, that prevented him from seeing Jesus. Zacchaeus didn't choose to be short. It was the hand that he was dealt. And that meant that no matter how much he wanted to see Jesus, there were circumstances that were getting in his way. There are things like that for all of us that we're unable to control. Things about our lives that we didn't choose, but that seem to disqualify us anyway. Things like our background, maybe our family, maybe something that's happened to us in the past. Maybe it's something a bit more directly like Zacchaeus, something about who we are, our personality, our weaknesses. Why would God want anything to do with me? Zacchaeus was too short. But there's another obstacle that actually really is the one that's actually making that first obstacle be a problem, and that's the crowd. Zacchaeus couldn't see over the crowd. If there wasn't a crowd there, his height wouldn't have been an issue. This one's not really on him, it's on the people around him, the people in the way. And that's the thing so often we hear about crowds in the Gospels. Often crowds we hear about in the Gospels are religious people. They're the people that think they know who Jesus should be paying attention to and who he should be ignoring. People that are following Jesus around, and he says this to them earlier in Luke, following Jesus around but somehow missing the whole point of what it is he's there to do. And this is one of the more surprising barriers to Jesus. It's not open hostility, but still the way that crowd is structured is blocking Zacchaeus. It's true of some of us, those of us who have been following Jesus, but started to think that our job might be to guard access to him. And it can be a hard thing not to slip into. Someone walks into church and unconsciously our brains tick over a little bit. What's this person wearing? Who are they with? Do they look like they belong? And if the calculation doesn't add up, well, I don't want to talk to that person after church. I'm just going to talk to other people. But of course, there's a deeper problem behind Zacchaeus' access to Jesus. Even when he climbs the tree, even when he finds a way around the crowd, he's still not there. He's got a better view. He can see Jesus, but he's sitting in a tree. He's separated physically. He's waiting for Jesus to look up at him. His seeking has done a lot, but it's still brought him to the point where he needs something that he can't control. He needs Jesus to notice him. And he has no control over whether that happens or not. And this is how it can feel with our own seeking. Reading the Bible, trying to understand it, hoping that we're praying in the right way, coming to church, singing the right songs, climbing whatever our own trees are. But at the end of all of it, we're still waiting for something outside of ourselves, hoping that God sees us and that he notices, that all of that effort counts for something. And there might be a fear behind that hope. What if it doesn't count? What if I've climbed my tree and Jesus still walks past? What if God looks at me and sees all the ways that I don't measure up? What if I'm like the rich young ruler who went away because he couldn't give up what he was holding on to? I'm too short, I'm too blocked, I'm too flawed. I wonder what Zacchaeus' motivations were. We don't read his motivations directly in the text, but we could probably have a bit of a good guess about what they were. Maybe he wanted to feel better about himself. He undoubtedly wouldn't have felt too great about the way his community viewed him. Maybe he thought if he could just see Jesus, if he could encounter Jesus, it might fill that gap. Maybe he was looking for meaning or purpose, or really relief from the guilt of the life that he was living. And none of those are bad reasons, but those reasons are still about what he could get, what he needed, what would make his life feel more complete. And for many of us, that can be how we approach our own seeking, coming to God because we want something. Give me what I need and I'll believe. Make my life better and I will follow. Zacchaeus is in a tree, which is more effort than many people will ever make. But he's still ultimately sitting there with the most important part outside of his control, hoping that his seeking will be rewarded and worrying that Jesus is going to walk right past. Maybe the running and the climbing that he's done still won't be enough. And we read in Romans something fairly confronting that actually speaks directly to this. Romans 3:11. And it is a confronting verse. There is no one who understands. There is no one who seeks God. Paul writes, there is no one who seeks God. What does that mean? What are we to make with that? Zacchaeus seems like he's seeking. I feel like I'm seeking. The implication from Paul being that there is no one who seeks God in a way that really reaches him, in a way that actually allows for salvation. Our seeking is real, but it doesn't get us all the way there. It gets us up the tree, but it doesn't get us to salvation. And that's the position that Zacchaeus is in. He's done everything that he can, but he's still dependent on something that he can't control, hoping that Jesus will look up and see him. Verse 5, of course, changes the whole way that we read the passage. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today. Jesus does look up. He doesn't wait for Zacchaeus to find him. Jesus finds. And more than that, surprisingly enough, he seems to know Zacchaeus by name. They've never met. Jesus has never been to his house. He's never done business with him or had a conversation with him before, but Jesus already knows him by name. Zacchaeus probably thought that he was seeking Jesus. As it turns out, Jesus was waiting and seeking him. And the way that Jesus says this is important. He doesn't say, please, can I come to your house? Please, may I stay at your house? He says, I must stay at your house today. I must stay at your house today. That word must is an important word. It's the same word that Jesus uses later when he's talking to his disciples about going to Jerusalem to die. He uses the word must again. It's mission critical. It's vital that he does this. This is the whole purpose why Jesus was coming through. Jesus came to Jericho for Zacchaeus. That's the whole reason why he's here. Zacchaeus climbed up to see Jesus, and Jesus tells him, come down and let me stay at your house. It's the gospel in one movement. We can't climb to God even as hard as we try. And who does Jesus seek? Well, verse 7 tells us that the crowd muttered, he's gone to be the guest of a sinner. The crowd is outraged. Jesus is supposed to stay with them. He's supposed to stay with the religious people, the respected people, not with Zacchaeus. Why would he stay with someone like that? But of course, that's the exact person that Jesus is seeking: the tax collectors, the sinners. Verse 10 sums it all up. The Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. Jesus is defining his mission in one sentence. And it's not I came so that people could find me if they tried hard enough. It's I came to seek. It's active. He's pursuing. This is who Jesus is. He's seeking and he's saving. Seek and save. Verse 9 tells us what happens next. Today, salvation has come to this house. But how does Zacchaeus actually respond to Jesus identifying him, knowing him? Well, I wonder if you've ever been in a situation where, unlike that example I gave at the beginning, I wonder if you've ever actually ended up having a conversation with someone who you sort of already recognized. I wonder if it went the way that you thought it might. One of the things that happened while we were in Adelaide was we actually did end up having a brief encounter with someone that we recognised. It's sort of funny how these situations play out. You could probably imagine how it plays out. There was a group of us. We were walking past the river that runs through Adelaide, and we were walking to the footy ground, and we happened to see, sitting on a bench by the river, a television presenter that we recognised from the broadcast. And we saw him off in the distance. He was just sitting there by himself, just on his phone, dressed casually, sort of wasn't on duty or anything like that. And we saw him off in the distance, and as we approached, one of the guys that I was there with got the idea that it would be a good idea to be a bit cheeky with him, sort of share a few words just to let him know, we know who this is, but we're not going to we're going to play it a little bit cool, just sort of share a few words, and wanted to specifically reference a bit of a mild controversy that this guy had been involved with. I tend to have a little bit too much self-awareness in these situations, so I played it pretty cool. I sort of backed off and just went, look, he's just a normal guy. Let's just walk past. We don't even need to acknowledge. Let's just walk past and play it cool. But my mate he insisted. He's like, no, how often do you get these sort of opportunities? Let's have a bit of fun. And I'm sort of, oh gee. So I remember I was behind, but I remember the expression on the face of the presenter. I was hanging back, and my mate is walking towards him, and I assume he's got this sort of cheeky expression on his face, sort of clearly looking like he's locked and loaded with something to a few words of wisdom to sort of drop on him. And I remember looking at the face of the presenter, and he's on his phone, he's scrolling. And the way he responded completely diffused the situation. It was like he was an expert at it. He's on his phone, and he's looking down on his phone, and he lifts his head up and sees my mate sort of walking towards him, and he just looks at him and goes, "G'day, mate. Nice jacket." And that was it. And my mate is so stunned that this was his response that he's caught completely off guard, and thanks, and just kept walking. Had nothing to say, had absolutely nothing to say, with a few of us chuckling along behind him. And clearly it was sort of, this guy was a bit of an expert, knew that people sort of like to have a bit of a back and forth, and sort of knew how to diffuse those situations. But our experience seeing and recognising this person, it was nothing how we expected it to be. And we weren't even really expecting to be involved in a conversation, right? So when the guy actually had something to say and had something nice, just a nice platitude to say about my friend, it caught him completely off guard. Zucchini. I imagine Zacchaeus was probably not expecting Jesus to have much to say to him either. Was that subtle enough? I don't know. How did Zacchaeus react? How did Zacchaeus react when he did? Well, verse 8 shows us, if we go back to the text, how did Zacchaeus respond? Zacchaeus stands up and he says, "Look, Lord, here and now I will give half my possessions to the poor. If I've cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount." It's far beyond what Zacchaeus is required to do in the law. We can read in Leviticus that he was not required to pay back this much. This was far beyond what his legal requirements were. And for Zacchaeus, who I imagine certainly would have been caught off guard by the fact that Jesus actually had something to say for him, well, instead of being caught off guard, instead of being embarrassed, backing down, shying away, Zacchaeus allows himself to be transformed by what Jesus has for him. He gives back far beyond what he needed to. But notice the order. This happens after Zacchaeus has received the invitation from Jesus. Zacchaeus' generosity is in verse 8. His salvation is in verse 9. So it looks like one way of reading it is to sort of go, oh, is there a timeline here? Are we reading about the order here? But Luke is showing us the nature of how Zacchaeus' transformation went. It's not that Zacchaeus gave everything away and thus earned his salvation. It's that Zacchaeus received the invitation from Jesus, and as a result, he gave everything away. The generosity came from being found. He wasn't being generous just as another effort to climb the tree. It came after he was found. And this is what it means that Jesus sought us first. We didn't wake up one day and decide to pursue God out of nowhere, for no reason, just randomly. Something was actually already at work in us. God has already been seeking us. That desire that we feel to know him, to see God, to find Jesus, that's actually not us generating feelings out of nowhere, just randomly. It's us responding to a God who is already pursuing us. It's sort of a little bit like one way that Christians can frame their testimonies sometimes, sharing their story of how they found salvation, but framing it from I found God. This is what I did. This is how I got through this time. When the reality is that it's Jesus that seeks us first. Zacchaeus climbed the tree, but ultimately Jesus had been walking to Jericho far earlier than Zacchaeus climbed the tree. He was already coming that direction. Jesus finishes by declaring that Zacchaeus is a son of Abraham. He's restoring his identity. He's taking someone that the community had rejected, that they despised, and declaring him part of God's family. And the wording here is important too. He says, this man too is a son of Abraham. Zacchaeus' redeemed identity doesn't take away from, it doesn't crowd out anyone else. This man too is a son of Abraham. Back to the start. In Adelaide, I remember seeing people that didn't see me. They had no idea who I was. It was one directional. And Zacchaeus might have expected that. He climbed the tree hoping to see Jesus, but Jesus saw him first. He was traveling to Jericho far before Zacchaeus climbed the tree. He knew his name. He came to his house. And that's the gospel. We seek because we're being sought after. We look for Jesus because Jesus is already looking for us. And unlike when we seek other people, Jesus sees us first. He knows our name. He invites us in. The Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost, and that includes all of us.